and welcome to the Conversation Society. My name is Amanda, and I'll be your host here. I created the Conversation Society because I have one main goal in mind, and truly that is I want to help people understand themselves on a more deep level so that they can better battle their mental health disorders and illnesses. Why? Well, I am no stranger to mental health disorders myself, and I have struggled with many things over the years as a person who was raised in a very traumatic situation, which only led to more traumatic and difficult decisions and life experiences. My desire to come on here and talk to you all truly comes from a place of compassion, from somebody that has survived those multiple traumas and eventually pursued a formal education in psychology. And not because I thought that there was money to be made, because I wanted to understand better what happened to me and why that I developed the way that I did as a result, why the people that did the things they did to me did them, right? I wanted to understand them better. I felt like there was no moving forward until I could make some sense of so many nonsensical things that had happened in my life. Here on this channel on YouTube, I hope to talk about some of the basics, some of the topics, the reasons, the explanations, and I want to break them down, hopefully on a more simplified level, in a more humanistic manner. I want to try to tie them back to personal experiences so that we can connect all those big words and theories and approaches, and we can actually see how they fit into specific examples within our actual daily lives of being traumatized or having traumas or even just struggling with mental health disorders. The two are not synonymous, right? We can have mental health disorders without overarching trauma background. So, through my own trials and tribulations of exploring myself and what had become of my life and who I had become, I learned so much about not only my biology and how that played a part, but also how my lived experiences really came to guide the way that I behaved and responded and thought. And while there is room for accountability, absolutely, there's also room for understanding. And the two can be hand in hand, right? We need to understand that maybe that's the reason that some people are able to make a decision that you would never make, right? We don't know the billions of steps that it took to get to that point, right? And it's no longer acceptable to just say it doesn't matter because it does matter. And we know that it matters. Neuroscience tells us that there are changes in the brain, that our brains develop differently, they function differently. So this is not something to just write off and pretend like it's not a thing, right? There was no point in time when anybody decided, hey, I want to have a mental illness. I would like my brain to be sick and lying to me all the time and convincing me that I'm better off dead. People don't ask for that, right? It's a result of things that have happened, much like any other ailment, right? They happen as a result of something else. So I want to really drive that home, and I really want to help people understand that, because we have to take back our worth and our value and our power and our energy from the things that have sucked us dry over the years, and over our lifetimes, right? We have to learn to accept ourselves for who we are and how we developed and the decisions that we made, and know that unfortunately there's no such thing as a time machine. And even if there were, who knows, right? We can't go back in time. We can't change anything. We cannot control that. What we can control, though, is right now, analyzing those things, working through those things, and determining how do I want to respond in the future? What is the way that I want to be in these types of situations? How would I prefer to respond, right? And that doesn't mean you are wrong or bad or anything like that. It does not decrease your worth, right? We do what we know, what we're taught, what we saw. It's habitual, it's often subconscious, right? Until it's not. And that's why self-awareness is so important, right? That's why it's hard for addicts to get help until they say, it's this is it, this is the time. Now I'm ready, right? We have to reach a point where we say, no more. I have to figure this out on a deeper level because I don't want to keep punishing myself for it forever. So that's my goal. I truly want to help people understand themselves. I want to break things down, like I said, in a simpler, more humanistic manner so that we can hopefully, right, find some peace, find some solace, find some healing, right? and stop beating ourselves up every single day because nobody deserves that. Nobody deserves to have to feel like the bottom of the barrel every single day of their lives, especially when there are likely so many reasons and so many things that led them there. And does that mean people just get to behave however they want to behave? Absolutely not. But does that mean that we need to learn to have some grace? Yeah, it sure does. So, like I said, it's time to take your power back from the things that have drained you. And it's time to give yourselves credit and some grace with all of the things that you've been through and everything that you have accomplished despite those struggles. You're still here and you're watching this video. And that gives me a lot of hope that maybe you're at that moment where you say, it's time. I'm not going to punish myself forever. I'm going to try to understand and pave a new way forward because I deserve that. So, if that conversation sounds interesting to you, please check out the channel, subscribe if you have not already, and join me in the conversation in the comment sections down below. So, today we're going to dive into emotions. I want to start right at the ground level, right? We're going to talk about what they are, where they come from, but most importantly, we're going to talk about what we can do with our emotions once we understand them. And this really, for me, is the perfect starting place in understanding mental illness in the humanistic way that I'm hoping, right, to share with you all. So join me in the conversation, comment section down below. And without any further ado, let's hop right into today's video, emotions. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in to emotions. What are they? Let's start there. So, emotions are pretty complex, actually, right? But they're responses, essentially. So, if we want to keep it simple, emotions are responses to meaningful events in our lives, right? Um, they include several different areas and factors, right? So, our subjective feelings, our personal subjective feelings, as well as physical changes within our bodies, our personal cognitive or our personal interpretations of the things that we've been through and experienced, as well as behavioral reactions, right? We can see a lot of behavioral reactions in emotional states. Think of when you're angry, what's something that might happen, or when you're sad, what something might happen. Um, these are all shaped by our thoughts, brain processes, and social contexts, like I said, right? So when we're looking and thinking about emotions, while as human beings, we all inhabit a similar human form, our emotions, while universal, are not going to present in the same ways. Okay. There are all of those different factors we talked about, right? Our own personal experience, our biology, the way that we're raised, the way that we interpret things, the way that we were taught to interpret things. There are all different ways that we are going to develop that determine, right, how our emotions present in our behavior and in our thought processes. So bring it all the way back to survival mode, right? Like this is the area of the brain that wants to keep us safe. So it sends the alarms, it kicks things off. Like there's something noteworthy here, something we need to pay attention here, good or bad or indifferent, right? It's a trigger or a or a response. Like I said, so throughout the history of psychology, many theorists have had many different explanations as far as how what emotions are and how they develop. So some of those include um, some theorists thought it was bodily reactions, right? Our emotions were a result of our bodily reactions. Um, it's that we are trembling because you feel fear rather than we feel fear and then we tremble, right? There is also a theory that talks about how um, physical changes and emotional experiences occur simultaneously, but independent of one another, right? So they say both things happen, but they happen separately. They're not tied together. And Another one suggests that emotions are not universal, but constructed based on social, cultural, and individual experiences. And the more we know about psychology and behavior theory, the more we're starting to see and realize, right, that it really is a biopsychosocial model when we're looking into explanations and reasons for things. And this is no different, obviously. Okay, so there are six basic emotions that are pretty universal across all different cultures and people. And those are happiness. So this is associated with feelings of pleasure and satisfaction. There is sadness, which is often linked to disappointment or helplessness, fear, which is triggered by a perceived threat, or it helps prepare us to avoid danger. Anger is a response typically to perceived injustice or frustration. Disgust is a reaction to something that we find repulsive or offensive and probably led by social context, right? And then surprise, an emotional response to something unexpected that can either be positive or negative, right? Surprises aren't always a good thing for a lot of people. So where do they come from? Where do they live? Where does all of this happen? Well, obviously in the brain, right? Our emotions are rooted in our brain, particularly the limbic system. Does that matter? Not really. But things like the amygdala and hippocampus, if you're interested in that type of thing, and the prefrontal cortex, these are the areas of the brain that are typically responsible for emotions and the way that we respond to things. Okay. And I put that in there because it's important to note, as I stated in the beginning of the video, that there is evidence in science that points to the fact that there are changes or differences in the brain, right? And that makes a difference because I don't know about you, but deciding one day that I'm just going to control my prefrontal cortex is not something I can just do or do on my own, right? That's something I definitely need to dig into and learn more about. Additionally, though, right, there's also things like hormones, neurotransmitters, right, where we talk about dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin a lot. And these hormones all play key roles in the ways that we experience our emotions. Like dopamine, right, it's linked to the reward or pleasure systems. And serotonin, on the other hand, it affects our moods and feelings of well being. Okay. So some of us don't produce enough of those things on our own, right? That's not by fault of our own. Okay. We didn't choose to be in a dopamine deficit, right? But we are. So what can we do about it? So when we start to think about emotions in this regard, right, as responses to stimuli based on our experiences, where we were born, who we were born to, the way we were raised, our schooling, our friend groups, all of these things play a role in the development of the way we respond to our emotions. So what is an emotion? What is a mood, right? Emotions are typically short-lived. They're triggered by specific events. They're usually more intense, but temporary. Now, a mood, right? That's kind of longer lasting, less intense. It's unlike emotions. We don't need a clear trigger to identify um, what's going on. We can influence. So, unlike emotions, moods don't need a clear trigger. Okay. They can influence how we respond to various situations throughout the day, but there's not one thing that makes us feel an emotion. It's just our general mood at any given time. So what do we do with all of this, right? And ultimately, it comes down to emotional regulation. Okay, so how do we manage, modify, or control our emotional responses? Well, it can be conscious, right? So either deciding to calm down after an argument, or unconscious by repressing your feelings of sadness. Okay. Effective regulation is critical for our mental well being. It can involve strategies like a reappraisal, right? So, changing how we think about a situation, or suppression, which is inhibiting our emotional expressions. Now, something that I want to say about suppression is that when we push down our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings, and we shove them down because we think they're too painful to face and to deal with at the moment, I'm here to tell you that they don't go anywhere. In fact, they just live in our bodies now, right? So now those things are just stuff down, stuff down, stuff down, and wreaking havoc in our physical bodies. Also, research that shows now, right, that that can make a big difference. We can have physical ailments as a result of our mental ailments if we just avoid and ignore and pretend nothing's going on for long enough, right? We kind of push those things down. Reappraisal is something that seems impossible when you're really in the thick of some mental illnesses. Why? Because mental illness has a way of allowing our brains to tell us bad things on repeat all the time, whether we realize it or not. Now, an example I'll use here is that I grew up with a very angry stepfather. He struggled with addiction, still does. Um, However, his response to everything was very much anger. And I now see that there are many reasons that he developed that way. But as a child, I didn't know that. So I saw that any sort of opposition, any sort of feedback, any sort of criticism, anything should be met with anger and defense. And that's what I did for a really long time. And I didn't realize that I was doing that, but I thought I was keeping myself safe, right? It seemed, it's what I knew. And at least I knew, or I thought I knew, how to navigate that. What I didn't know how to navigate in my mind at that time was the rest of the world, right? I didn't know how to navigate that. That was scarier. So we focus, we stay where we are, right? Because we think that it's easier to truck through and get through those things. But it's not. It just wreaks havoc on our bodies and our brains, and it has long-term repercussions. Now, the thoughts, like we've talked about, are subconscious, they're habitual. Okay, they're things that I believed that I was a not a valuable, worthy human being because my angry stepfather told me that on a regular basis, right? Um, Constantly told me he didn't want me, he didn't want me to be around, things like that in my brain from a very young age. And as I developed, I heard that so much that I believed that, right? I wasn't ever going to amount to anything. I wasn't ever going to be good enough. I was always right. All of these things, all of these terrible things, I believed because the people that I trusted as adults that were supposed to take care of me as I knew it in society, that's what they were telling me. So that's what I believed. And it wasn't until many, many, many years later that somebody had to call me on that and somebody had to have conversations with me on that. And it was not easy, but it was so worth it, right? It's so worth it in the end to say, okay, I need to figure out where this came from so that I can decide, is it serving me now and still and going forward? Or would it better serve me to leave that man's baggage at the door, leave his responses, his words, keep them over here because you're not going to control me anymore. You're not going to have my power. You're not going to have my energy, right? You had it long enough, and now it's my turn. And I'm going to take those things and I am going to develop them the way that I want to develop them, the way that I prefer to develop them. And that is going to take some hard work. This is not easy to have to be consistently catching yourself and your thoughts and your feelings and questioning them and asking them if they're real or if they're relevant, right? It's not easy work. It does take some time. It takes anywhere from 20 something days to 200 something days to break or build a habit. Okay. So just like those habits were built up in our brains, or those negative thought processes were built up in our brains, um, all that time ago, we need to work to undo those things. Okay. We need to break some of those connections down and replace them with new, healthier, better for you thought processes. And that's not your fault. Okay. It's not your fault. It is what it is, what it is. But right now, let's decide I'm going to take control of this. I'm going to figure out why I have the emotions that I have and the responses to the things that I have, the triggers. I want to know where all of that came from because once I do that, I can better understand and accept myself, and I can better move forward. And really, that's what I want. That's what I want for everybody that has been through trauma, right? Is to find their own peace. Not what society says, not what their family says, not what their friends say, not what they thought it was always going to be, but their own peace, their own happiness within themselves. And that is going to look very different for a lot of different people, obviously, right? As it should. So, right? Essentially speaking, emotions are responses. Okay. The responses to stimuli that developed likely subconsciously, some of them consciously. Either way, once we identify them and recognize them, we can challenge them. And then once we challenge them, we can start to break down that habitual subconscious thought process and be intentional with replacing it with different new positive thought processes. And like I said before, know that this is not an easy thing to do, but it's something that's so worth doing. When you have an emotion that arises, when you are struggling with an emotion, instead of trying to hide or run from it, I want you to look at it and face it. If you're in a place that you can do that at that time, right? Look at it, face it, analyze it. Where is it coming from? Why is it here? Am I in danger right now? Do I currently need to feel this way? Is this response to this stimuli necessary, right? I get why it happens, but right now in this moment, am I okay? Am I in imminent danger? Probably not, right? But our brain has sensed something. Our brain has been triggered to think that something is amiss, right? So walls go up. And when walls go up, it can be incredibly difficult to accept anything in, right? And we can maybe see why that can become an issue long term. Emotions, there's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with you for having them. The ones that you have and the ones that you experience are not your fault or bad per se, right? They are what they are. But let's figure them out, right? Let's decide what do we want to do instead. So I'm going to cut it here at this point for this video, just for sake of time and not rambling for too long. But I hope this made sense. I hope that we have a kind of better, simpler understanding of emotions and what they are and why they happen so that we can do something about it. Because until we know, we don't know, right? But once we know, that's where we have to start doing something about it, right? For our own good, because you're worth the investment. You're worth the time. You are valuable. You're amazing. I'm proud of you. Uh, Great work getting after putting some effort into yourself. And thank you for joining me in this video. Like I said at the beginning, if you have anything to say, add comments, anything like that, please do so in the comment section down below. And again, like this video and subscribe if you have not already. It helps my message get out to more people and hopefully help others. So thank you for sticking with me. I hope I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.